There are plenty of good mechanics in video games.
It looks like a sword fits here.
And then there are, of course, bad game mechanics. From cheap design tricks to features that actively make games much worse. Some are annoying, some are outdated, and some feel born of spite. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 20 game mechanics we absolutely hate. Starting off with number 20, when an enemy's nearby and you just can't do anything. It's probably one of the most persistently annoying mechanics in modern games. It pops up everywhere, and it always is annoying and almost always unnecessary. I get not being able to perform certain actions if you're in a combat stance, but often this mechanic locks you out of doing anything, from sleeping to travel to something basic like opening chests. If there's a particularly unfriendly weevil within a 5-mile radius, sorry, you can't do anything unless you spend 15 minutes hunting the creature down or waiting for them to go somewhere else. Nearly every open world game with some RPG mechanic somewhere is guilty of doing this in some capacity. I get that you can't do certain things if a goblin is currently smacking you around with a club, but just being around, like in the tri-state area, I guess, it's maybe a bit aggressive for locking you out of doing even the most basic stuff. A basic thing you can do to see more gameranx videos and help us out is enable notifications. The YouTube homepage is a mess of shorts and crap, and we get people telling us they don't see all our videos. Enabling notifications will help you hopefully see something you want to see. It's doing us a big solid, so thanks for enabling them. Let's get back to the video. And number 19, the annoying low health sound. Speaking of annoying, being low on health is stressful enough anyway, right? Why do we need a thing that's like covering your screen in red jelly or flashing warning lights, or worst of all, having an annoying beeping buzzing sound that plays nonstop until you restore your health? I get the idea that this sort of mechanic, I guess it can be useful in certain highly specific examples, like really fast-paced games. But let's be serious, even a huge classic like Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past hurts to play on low health. The original Fable, also a prime example. The chatty, omniscient guild master will constantly remind you that your health is low by patronizingly asking if you have any potions or food. The classic Metroid sound as well, pretty annoying. I'll be fair to it and Link to the Past a little bit more than recent games, though, on account generally you're never too far from a health pickup in an old game. Inexplicably, Metroid Prime 4 has one of the worst examples of this sort of thing because of its open world. There's not a lot of stuff to break or health pickups, but there are enemies wandering around. It's a combination that can lead to these long segments where the game is constantly beeping at you and there's nothing you can do about it. Some modern games are nice enough to top off your health automatically to a base level after a moment or two of not getting hit, and frankly, I don't mind that sound then. And Metroid Prime 4 is an otherwise pretty decent game, and I think they should have done that, because man, those warning sounds are excessive and very annoying. And number 18 is rubber banding. We and pretty much everyone else on the internet complain about rubber banding in racing games constantly, and there's a simple reason for that. It's because it sucks. Basically, every game with some form of racing mechanics is going to have rubber banding to some degree, and at its best, this mechanic can keep races against AI at least competitive, and make it so if you do screw up, other racers will compensate somewhat, give you at least a chance to recover. But that's the best case scenario. That's when it actually does what it's meant to do, and most games where it has rubber banding, that people complain about anyhow, don't work like that. Often, AI gets all the advantages and none of the disadvantages. They don't play by the rules at all. They just out of nowhere get over 9,000 miles per hour simply because you're racing too good, and suddenly they overtake you in the last lap out of nowhere. ton of racers make it so you're dominating the race from minute 1, you're cruising around with 0 difficulty, and then out of nowhere, the AI decides to hit the I win button, and now you're 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or even 16th place, just because the game decided it's time for you to lose, basically. That's the worst case scenario for rubber banding, but it happens much more often than it should. There's so many games where it just doesn't make any sense. You're driving like a McLaren supercar up against an AMC Gremlin, and that little hatchback is riding your tail the entire race. Little bit of rubber banding, fine. Honestly, not even really something to complain about. Like, what's the point of even having different car classes if the AI just makes them all drive as fast as you? And number 17, when they add enemies to boss fights. Boss fights can be bad enough, but what if we put in a regular fight in the middle of the boss fight? I don't know about you, but one of the most annoying things in a game is when they dump a bunch of little extra chump enemies. It's annoying, it drags the fight out unnecessarily, and it adds an obnoxious element of chaotic luck to what would otherwise be, or might be, a skill-based encounter. It's kind of a classic MMO design that's bled into normal games. Common crutch for games that are primarily co-op focused, but one-on-one bosses can be kind of odd when you're fighting them with 2 to 4 players. You know, I kind of get it there, why it might be like that in, say, Destiny 2, especially for a raid encounter, or maybe why it's in something like Remnant, a co-op multiplayer shooter. With a team, it's maybe not the biggest deal. If you're solo, it sucks. And here's the thing, some games do this not badly, and others really don't. Some bosses incorporate lots of little additional enemies in a clever way, especially some older JRPGs, but most of the time it's either an additional and extremely annoying inconvenience or straight up blatant padding designed to make the fight longer. Annoying either way though. It's infuriating when extra enemies appear during the fight. It's miserable when the boss steps away and forces you to fight waves of enemies before they appear again. It just sucks. Yes, there are rare instances where it can be kind of okay, like Metal Gear Rising Revengeance can get away with it, but a lot of other games pull this crap and are not nearly as good as that game. And number 16, the walk and talk, a classic that is still an issue somehow. Crimson Desert runs into this problem all the time. The semi-interactive cutscene is already kind of annoying. Somebody is talking to you and you have some slight control over the game, but mostly they just amount to being able to walk the same time that the other person talks. So many of these sequences just feel like a big waste of time. All you're doing is getting information conveyed at you.
I hate that there's so many Imperial soldiers around now.
Just ignore them. Take the route on the right to avoid any trouble.
If you can't make that a traditional cutscene, maybe skip it. Long, tedious walk and talks are super annoying, but they're even worse when games force you to follow somebody who does not move at the same speed you do. So when you try to follow them, they're either running too fast, or you're forced to stand around and wait like a chump, or you're just too slow when you walk. Running's not right, walking's not right, you're stuck doing a little bit of both. It adds this really unnecessary, annoying complication to something that should be about as basic of a game interaction as can be imagined. It's especially annoying because it's a problem that has been solved. There are a lot of games that are smart enough to simply make it so the person you're following moves the same speed you do. I mean, it's not necessarily great automatically when that is the case, but they're always slightly ahead, so it's clear where you're supposed to go, and they match where the pace is. So if you walk, they walk. If you sprint, they sprint. It's a simple, elegant solution, so the problem should be solved, and we're still getting this.
It'd be a shame to just hurry past. Let's take it slow. We deserve a little serenity every now and again.
And number 15, trial and error based gameplay. A tough one because some games do this sort of thing pretty well. I'm thinking of games like Inside. They sometimes pull the little gotcha moments on you, but the quick loading times alleviate some of that frustration. Other horror games do not do this as well, and it can lead to a lot of confusion and frustration. It is a very fine line that a horror game has to walk if it's going to do this, but the fear of death has to be there, and they can't just telegraph everything you're supposed to do because that would kill all the tension. At the same time, though, if you die too often, it also kills the tension because now you're thinking about game mechanics all the time. You're not immersed in the scariness of the experience. Some games really struggle with this, like Outlast 2, where death is quite common, but you're actually not always sure what the hell you're supposed to do. Even some of the all-time greats struggle with this sort of thing, like Resident Evil 7. The tape in the old house where you're supposed to avoid Marguerite Baker is very guilty of this. No matter how many times I replay this segment, I always forget how you're supposed to avoid her and not how to get caught. It's absolutely the bad kind of trial and error gameplay because until you die a few times, it's just not clear what you're supposed to do. And number 14 is level scaling. Oof, I know some people are actually out there willing to defend level scaling, and I'll admit there are very specific games where it works, Diablo-style action RPGs. Some games are smart about how they implement it, like Silksong, for example, has a mild level scaling mechanic. You unlock new upgrades, and it actually makes weaker enemies a little tougher. Basically makes it so you can't just wipe the floor with everything, while still making you feel more powerful in general. Compare that to one of the all-time greats of bad level scaling, Elder Scrolls Oblivion. For people playing this game normally, the scaling on enemies gets out of control fast. Like, one of the most common tips for the game is to not level up to avoid having the enemies scale up. That's a problem. That is obviously something not working. Outside of the mechanical issues making some games more annoying and grindy, it's often just a really dumb immersion-breaking mechanic. Why is every bandit decked out in glass armor now? Simply because you're better than you were. The world literally revolves around you. There's no other reason why everyone suddenly has super rare armor now. That's one of the worst examples, and obviously a lot of games have much more mild examples that are a lot easier to overlook, but in general, scaling sucks. I want to be able to go back to old areas and dominate enemies that gave me trouble at first. When you level up, you should feel stronger, not weaker, but that's generally what level scaling does. And number 13 is field skills. You ever play a game that incorporates some kind of arcane mechanic that's poorly explained, barely makes any sense, and ultimately feels tacked on and pointless? This mechanic is that, only somehow about 100 times worse. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a game where nobody said no when they really should have. The entire in-game gacha system is weird enough, but then you combine that with the baffling field skill stuff, and you have this entire chunk of the game that most players will just never engage with. Rightfully so, too. The idea that certain characters are needed to unlock specific parts of the map using specific skills, it's something the series just didn't give up on, as the third game had a similar mechanic, but the difference is that there aren't different levels of skills, and they can only be acquired using those skills on lower level field skill checks or just by being lucky. Most players are not going to be lucky, and most of these skills will go unused, which would just be kind of annoying if it was to unlock something basic like resource nodes or something, but a lot of these field skills are necessary to unlock segments of the map that just you need to eventually go to.
I call upon the power of fire!
And number 12 is main character dies, everybody dies. Why do games do this? I mean, I get it in a game like Mass Effect, where you're in full control of that character and the other characters feel less like other characters that you control.
That looked like it hurt.
But like in turn-based RPGs like Persona 3 or 5 or Yakuza 7. Yakuza 7! I mean, the Final Fantasy series, they get it right. If the main character gets killed or knocked out or whatever the nomenclature is, you can revive them with an item like a Phoenix Down or a spell. Like revive or whatever. If the entire party gets knocked out, it's game over, and that makes plenty of sense. If everyone is down, nobody is left to revive anybody. I mean, to some extent, you might expect the sort of backup party to eventually search for them, maybe find them and use some Phoenix Downs, I don't know. But that's, getting a little bit out of the purview of what you would want to do in a video game. Mechanically, it makes sense. But then there's games with this mechanic where your companions can go down normally, but if you, the protagonist, Joker, if you go down, it's immediate game over. Even though everyone else is around, they would be able to revive. They can't. It doesn't make any sense. It's frustrating as hell, and it just sucks. The remake of Persona 3 completely removed this feature and made it work like modern games because it's bad. Even Persona 3 Portable and just Persona 4 and Golden, they got rid of this. And for some reason they brought it back at 5. The only reason any game is doing it anymore is for tradition's sake, and I have to assume that's why Yakuza 7 does it, just as a reference to old school RPGs, because it doesn't make any sense why you would do that otherwise. It's not even a traditionally hardcore game, but for some reason, it's got this one super hardcore mechanic built in. I'll say at least with this one, more modern games are moving away from it. It does pop up here and there, but it's mostly vanished. And thank the god that you're probably going to kill at the end of the game for that. And number 11, click the stick. Here's one of those pet peeves a ton of people have, but games rarely, if ever, actually try to address it. Okay, I get using the stick as a button. I don't like it because it feels like every time you click the stick, it degrades the overall quality bit by bit, but as an additional button for a function that's meant to be used sparingly, I get it. The problem I have is with games that make you click it constantly. It's like if there's a game where you're like sprinting everywhere, or in Souls games where it's used to lock onto targets, or in certain open world games where you use a stick to activate detective vision. That gets annoying, especially in games where detective vision isn't a toggle. You have to spam it to keep the vision going. Man, is that annoying. And it never feels good or satisfying. It just feels really off. When you get the rare game that maps the vision mode to R2 or something and sprint on circle or something like that, it's a freaking revelation. There's so many alternatives to using the sticks like this, but until the controllers just straight up don't have the option anymore, developers are going to keep using it. It's literally just bad for the controller. And number 10 is mandatory stealth segments, especially in non-stealth games. Game mechanics don't get much more hated like this, and if anything, they might even be hated a little bit too much, like even if it's for a good reason. Not every unnecessary stealth segment is automatically terrible, but I can't blame anyone for feeling that way because of how common and ubiquitous the terrible forced stealth segment was in gaming for a while there. It was a scourge. Every half-baked movie-based game has them. For some reason, so many games wanted stealth, but they didn't want to put in the work to have actual mechanics, so they just made it really simple and binary. You either don't get seen and you win, or you do and you lose. Even games as beloved as Breath of the Wild or the Insomniac Spider-Man games somehow found a way to slide in some really annoying, highly scripted stealth segments. Like the Mary Jane parts in Spider-Man are crazy annoying. They can get worse than that though. Remember the forced sneaking in the Hulk movie game? You feel like blessing Mary Jane's holy name compared to that garbage. There's just way too many forced stealth segments in games. Even if they aren't necessarily the worst, devs find ways to make them annoying, inconsistent, and frustrating anyhow. If they just gave you something else to do, like some other way than sneaking or a way to deal with enemies if you got caught, this mechanic would be way less frustrating. But of course they don't, so 99% of the time, the mandatory stealth just makes the game worse.
Should be in the clip. There's no need for us to be skulking about.
So what is it you've been looking for?
And number 9, mashing buttons to do everything. Another holdover from the previous few generations. It's not so much a thing you see anymore, but now that we're a few years removed from it, it's time to admit the mashing we had to do in the 6th and 7th generation just kind of sucked. God of War might not be patient zero, but a lot of the blame on the over-reliance definitely falls on that series. It constantly had you doing this to do basic tasks like open treasure chests or doors, or most of the time, mashing never made any sense either. I mean, why are these random doors so hard to open for Kratos, who in the 2nd and 3rd game is a literal god? Even Batman struggles with some button mashing. Remember all those times you had to mash open gates in those games? I'm sure it was designed to mask a loading screen or make it less obvious or something, but that's probably why a lot of these games did this, and that didn't make it more fun. Like, knowing that makes it actually seem dumb. These days, most games give you the option to turn button mashing into something less annoying, like a button hold, but you still do get that every once in a while. For every legendary example of button mashing in games, like the torture sequence in Metal Gear Solid, where it actually kind of of feels like it makes sense and works. You got about a dozen examples of it done wrong, not satisfying, and, doesn't make sense.
And number 8 is box pushing. Pushing things so that you can push other things is older than the entire video game industry itself. Block pushing games are their own genre. There's literally hundreds of Sokoban games out there. It's kind of impressive because for as often as this mechanic appears in games, and for how many games there are where there's literally nothing else to do but push blocks and solve puzzles, nobody actually likes doing it. Everybody hates block/pushing puzzles, but so many games do it. There's never really a need for a Zelda 1 style dungeon puzzle. But hey, whatever Zelda you're playing, you're gonna get one. The Legacy of Kain is half combat and exploration, half box pushing simulator. Something even as new as Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has some pretty awful slow segments where you're forced to push around a box, or I guess a Mako gas vacuum. I don't know. It's a vacuum. You vacuum up some Mako gas. It's basically a box pushing puzzle. It's just something the games industry refuses to get rid of for some reason. We managed to stop the plague of Tower of Hanoi puzzles, but box pushing is just too elemental, too ingrained in gaming to completely get rid of, I guess. No matter how hard we all collectively wish.
And number 7, quests that unlock whenever they feel like it. Cyberpunk 2077, excellent game at this point, but it's got one very annoying thing that's becoming an annoying trend in some modern games. Instead of making it so a quest will appear immediately after wrapping up the preceding one, you have to wait around for the quest giver to call you or something. It makes receiving quests feel a lot more immersive, and it gives an in-universe reason why you're doing something that you're doing, but actually some of these quests, waiting for them to trigger is like pulling teeth. The problem is the actual triggers for these things are vague and not really properly conveyed to the player, so you're mostly left guessing when or if they'll appear. The trick with Cyberpunk is that you have to pass time and drive an arbitrary amount of time until the person contacts you, but in other games it works differently. There's no rhyme or reason to when or if you'll be able to continue the quest chain. It's just up to the game to decide. That kind of sucks when you want to see what happens next, you know? And number 6, the pity difficulty drop, the ninja dog mechanic. When game devs create a mechanic that's meant to be anti-frustration, but somehow it makes you much more frustrated. Like the mercy mode mechanic, where if you die enough times in a game, it'll eventually offer a chance to play on a lower difficulty. It would be considered forgiving if it basically didn't always make you feel like the ultimate chump. Dying multiple times to the same boss or challenge sucks. But so does giving up and turning on crybaby loser mode. At least with like Ninja Gaiden Black, they're honest and make fun of you.
Master Ryu, or should I say, young Ninja Ryu Hayabusa. It seems I have greatly overestimated you.
It's somehow less embarrassing to just get straight up insulted compared to the games that patronize you and try to act like they're doing you a favor. At least some games tell you if you're switching to a lower difficulty and say if it's permanent or not as well. Most games do, but some don't, like Metaphor, where if you die a lot and crank the difficulty down to the easiest, you cannot switch back to normal, and the game does not give you a warning about that before you do. And then there's the original God of War, where half of your deaths came from something that lowering the difficulty wouldn't affect. So you're stuck in a platforming challenge, and the game offers to lower the difficulty, but it doesn't make any difference. The mechanics should make the game feel more forgiving, but it just comes off like they're laughing at you behind your back. And number 5 is force motion controls. Yes, we are past the era, but if you ever want to go back and play a game on the Wii or the Wii U, or God help you, the Kinect, then you know the frustration that comes with games that force you to use motion controls. There were a lot of games that gave you options here. Not every Wii game was trapped in motion hell, but a lot of games gave you the option, like the classic controller or an alternative control scheme of some sort besides the standard motion controls. Way better. Some Switch games use motion controls, but basically all of of them allow for more traditional control options, and I am not complaining about those. The games I'm complaining about are the ones that just straight up forced you to use motion controls, especially when there wasn't really any reason, and they could have been controlled through traditional means, like the original Donkey Kong Country Returns, where you had to waggle the stick to roll and do a ground pound when you could have easily just assigned those actions to a controller, or Metroid Other M, where you had to point the Wiimote at the screen to fire missiles. Bizarre choice, because these games otherwise play like normal games. So many games are from that era were like this too, and trying to go back and play them is kind of a nightmare. Just trying to figure out what options you had for controllers in that era was a pain. It was totally inconsistent, changed from game to game. Even within their own series, there were a bunch of inconsistencies, and because of this, going back to this era, especially Nintendo, is very frustrating. Even if you do have the best Wii plus motion, whatever crap, you still need to figure out whatever waves and waggles the game wants you to do, and it's even more baffling in hindsight. And number 4, the same damn lock-picking minigame. It's in Fallout, it's in Skyrim, it's in Dying Light, it's in Star Wars Outlaws, it's in Starfield, and just about every other goddamn game you can imagine. The list just goes on, and it's always the same. At least Splinter Cell had a different perspective, and at least as bizarre as the lock-picking was in Oblivion, it did look different. It used to be that if you needed to unlock a door, it was just an automatic action or possibly required an expendable resource. There used to be options, but now the default is to copy Bethesda for some reason. It was novel in Fallout 3 and acceptable in games like Skyrim and maybe not so much in Fallout 4, but it's gotten old at this point. The hate isn't entirely on the mechanic itself either. It's sometimes just fine. Like, it's an acceptable minigame sometimes, maybe with specific doors, but man, does it pop up too often. Everybody's sick of it, it's tired, it's boring, it's annoying to have, and just do anything else. Like anything else, game devs. Anything new, because these lame lockpicking minigames are just less than nothing. And number 3 is Diablo-style loot in games that do not need it. Diablo 2, a massive hit. Path of Exile, huge. World of Warcraft, a big business. Destiny and Borderlands are popular. But what ties these things together? It certainly doesn't sound like these are the same thing, but they're all about getting loot. And when the industry collectively decided to shift to the live service model, the most obvious thing to do is to take what are essentially single-player games and toss in a loot hamster wheel on top of the obsessive compulsiveness of other stuff to keep everybody playing forever, especially people who want to complete things. The problem is that not all loot is created equal. You can't just load up a game with loot and expect people to automatically like it. The loot actually has to be good, and that's the issue. Too much loot is just wasting time, not just from collecting it, but for menu navigating, and it's very little payoff. Basically, every quasi-live service game haphazardly inserted collecting a ton of junk into the gameplay loop. Suicide Squad did it, Avengers did it, Injustice 2, worst of all, Anthem, which had some of the most abysmal loot I have ever seen, and that's in comparison to Suicide Squad and its 3% extra damage to Batman-infused enemies. If you know what that means, I'm sorry. We all had to go through that together, though. Even in games that actually have okay loot, it can still be annoying. Like, the Neo games are basically anything Team Ninja has made in the last 10 years. The weapons and armor you get can be interesting and mechanically satisfying, but that basically only happens in New Game Plus. Before that, it's a bunch of trash sorting. Like, they throw so much loot at you that a non-insignificant portion of the game is just finding ways to get rid of it. Even with multiple modes of automation to speed up sorting and destroying loot, it gets annoying after a while. And number 2 is time-based mechanics. There are games with time limits, and out of those games, maybe 1 or 2 of the hundreds seem to have done it correctly. Those 1 or 2 are shining examples. Games like Dead Rising or Majora's Mask, or even something more obscure like Unsighted. These games have done it correctly. It's not like it doesn't exist, but I'm focusing more on extra modes like Kenway's Feet from Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, or the dispatch missions from Metal Gear Solid 5. These things, you send some guys out to do a quest for you, and you're forced to wait actual real time before that mission completes.
What sort of warrior are you looking for? I was waiting for you.
It's like something out of a free-to-play mobile game, but it's part of a full-price game, and there's really no reason for it. These mechanics are at least kind of tolerable if you can do some trick like rolling the clock forward in PC or console, but if the game doesn't allow that and forces you to be online so you can check in with the server, that's just another tedious bit of busy work they can throw at you to keep your eyes glued to the screen. It's about engagement, not gameplay. And these kinds of mechanics are rarely satisfying or actually fun. They're more just screens that you have to sort through to get to fun stuff. And finally, good lord, we're finally at number 1, the Battle Pass. I mean, not necessarily a bad thing as a whole. In certain games, it kinda works, but as a game mechanic, it feels like a bludgeon being used by publishers and developers to force players to waste as much time playing their game as possible. Like, take the recent release of WWE 2K26, where they've replaced the standard season pass model with the ringside pass, which is basically the same thing. You still have to buy it for $50, but instead of just unlocking the wrestlers when you buy it, they force you to grind through a battle pass to get the same stuff that last year all you had to do was pay some money. Not that paying money is something you should have to do in a game that you've already paid money for, but paying money to have to grind like hell in order to get your stuff that you paid for, it's an absurd model that's designed specifically to either waste your precious time on this earth or make you pay more money to do a little extra tier skipping. Yeah, a cheeky little tier skip for an extra $5 or something. Ugh. These season pass models have just gotten super obnoxious. The thing about these things is that hardcore players can say that actually clearing the pass doesn't take that long, but when you compare the previous year's no time to what it is now, it's a huge and unnecessary pain in the ass that objectively makes a game worse. Players are getting tired of the season pass model. Too many games are relying on it for retention, and the more games we get with this mechanic, the more players are just going to realize that the FOMO they once felt is evaporating away. We're getting flooded with so many worthless, overpriced, and unnecessary battle passes that at a certain point you just can't care anymore. And when you stop caring, that's when you're finally free. That's all we've got for today. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me. I'm Falcon. Become a member of the 1% Club with the button below. Listen to Falcon Show exclusively every Saturday. We have a blast doing that. We thank you so much. We'll see you next time right here on GameRanx.